Hello everyone. Before we start, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you. That's how YouTube keeps sending you stories like this. And now, let's get into it. I took the job because I was behind on child support and running out of excuses that even I believed. The dispatcher did not ask about my record, my logbook gaps, or why my last company let me go. He said cash, same week, and that was enough. I had been hauling grain for months, long beach days between silos, scale tickets, dust in the cab. Nothing that followed me home. This was sealed freight out of Billings, picked up after midnight. He said it like it was nothing. I heard the way he avoided details and decided not to press. Desperation has a way of sanding down caution. The pickup was behind a shuttered ethanol plant on the edge of town, a place that smelled like sour mash even with the doors chained and the windows boarded. The gravel lot had weeds frozen into it, stalks snapped and leaning, headlights cutting them into sharp shapes. There were no company logos, no security shack, no paperwork office. Just a white trailer already hooked up to a tractor that was not mine. The keys were taped to the steering column. The bill of lading listed a weight that sat within legal limits, destination vague, but precise enough to route me north and east, away from anything that would ask questions. I did my walk around because habit outlives fear. Tires looked new, lights worked. The seal on the trailer doors was intact, bright plastic with a stamped number. I checked it twice. The metal skin showed faint ripples between the ribs, not damage, just the way thin steel remembers past loads. I climbed into my cab, adjusted mirrors, and pulled out. The trailer felt wrong from the start. Not heavy, not dragging, uneven. When I braked at the end of the lot, there was a delayed shift, a soft push that arrived after my foot came off the pedal. I told myself it was a high center of gravity, poor load bracing, pallets sliding a hair. Sealed freight does that sometimes. You learn to live with it. The route avoided way stations and towns. That was obvious. County roads with no shoulder, half-plowed. The kind where the snow packs hard and turns blue under the moon. No cell signal. Montana emptiness does not need help to swallow you, but this path made it thorough. The radio picked up static and distant farm reports, then nothing. My headlights cut a tunnel through frost fog that hugged the low spots. The road signs were shot through, bent, names faded to ghosts of letters. Around 2 in the morning the thumps started. Not rhythmic, not mechanical. One heavy impact, then a pause, then a scrape like something dragged across corrugated steel. I felt it through the seat more than I heard it. The trailer shuddered, then went still. I tightened my grip and told myself the cold was settling the load, metal contracting, straps shifting. I adjusted speed. The noise came again when I braked for a curve. Same pattern. Drop. Drag, silence. Then there was the smell. Wet iron, sharp and old, mixed with something sweet and rank like livestock pens after rain. It crept forward through the vents, faint but unmistakable. Grain smells dusty. Fertilizer burns your nose. This was neither. I cracked a window and the cold bit my cheek clean and empty. The smell lingered inside, stuck to fabric, not carried on the air. I checked the gauges. All normal. I pulled over once. That decision still lives in my hands, the way they shook when I set the brake. The shoulder was nothing but packed snow and gravel. I put on my jacket, grabbed my flashlight, and walked back. The night pressed in. The trailer doors were sealed. The number matched the bill. I ran my light along the skin. For a second, the metal bulged outward between 2 ribs, just enough to catch the beam, then relaxed. It looked like pressure from inside. A slow breath released. I stepped back so fast my heel slid. The smell was stronger here, metallic and damp. I did not touch the doors again. I did not linger. I climbed back into the cab, hands numb, heart steadying because there was no room for panic. I drove without stopping. No bathroom breaks. No fuel. I kept my speed smooth. Brakes light, curves wide. Every time I slowed, I felt the same delayed shift, The same soft push after motion stopped. The thumps came less often, then not at all. The smell never left. Dawn crept up behind me, a pale line that made the frost fog glow. I passed no one. I crossed into a place where the land flattened and the sky widened, and the road turned to dirt without ceremony. The drop was a lot marked only by a single sodium lamp. Its light hummed and flickered, turning everything the color of old bruises. There were no buildings, just a fence line and a row of empty trailers parked like teeth. A man waited near a pickup with no plates. He did not look me in the eye. He checked the seal, nodded once, and waved me forward. I dropped the trailer and pulled clear. He hooked up without speaking, worked fast, practiced. I took the envelope from the cab, where it had been left earlier, and counted the cash later, alone, hands still smelling like cold metal. I went home and slept for 12 hours. When I woke, my clothes still held that scent. I washed them twice. It stayed. I told myself stress does that, makes memories stick to things. I paid what I owed. I took safer runs. Grain again. The delayed shift did not leave me. Sometimes when I braked hard, there it was, a soft arrival after the stop. I checked my mirrors, my suspension, my fifth wheel. Everything was tight. The smell came back on cold mornings, faint, like a bruise you forget until you press it. Months later, I saw a news piece buried between weather and sports. It was about a busted operation moving unreported slaughter waste across county lines, dumping it where inspections were rare. They talked about sealed trailers, night runs, routes that avoided scales. They showed photos of white trailers with rippled skins. They mentioned pressure buildup from decomposition gases, the way it can bow metal if vents are blocked. They described the smell in careful language that did not quite hide the truth. Wet iron. Pens after rain. It fit too well to ignore. The uneven load. The delayed shift when mass moved inside a sealed box. The thumps when something collapsed under its own weight and slid. The bulge when gas pressed against thin steel and found a weak place. No monsters. No voices. Just the physics of decay and the economics of corners cut. I understood why the man would not meet my eyes. I understood why there was no paperwork. I stopped taking cash jobs. I told the court the truth and set up a payment plan that hurt but did not rot. I replaced my cab filters. I scrubbed the sleeper with bleach and steam. The smell faded. The delayed shift did not. It is a memory my body learned, a reflex waiting for weight that is not there. When I brake now, I give myself an extra second. I keep the distance. I do not pull over on empty roads at night. I check seals and skins, and if something feels wrong, I walk away. Some freight pays twice, once in cash and once in what it leaves behind. My cousin and I ran team because it made sense on paper. One truck, 2 paychecks, fewer motel rooms, more miles. Hotshot freight meant tight windows and bad sleep, but it kept the lights on. We learned to live on caffeine and habit. One of us drove while the other half slept in the bunk, counting rumble strips like a metronome. Nights blurred together. Roads lost their names. Mile markers became landmarks in our heads. That night sat clean and cold. No wind, no rain, the kind of dark where headlights feel thick, like they have weight. We were moving steady when the brake lights ahead flared red all at once. No cones, no flares, no warning signs, just traffic compressing in the dark. The slowdown felt wrong. Nobody leaned on a horn. Engines idled. The quiet spread backward through the line like a held breath. We stopped at mile marker 83. The smell of hot brakes drifted through the cab vents. Diesel haze hung low. I watched taillights shimmer and settle. 10 minutes passed. The minutes felt counted by the idle. No sirens. No flashers up ahead beyond the usual hazards. The road cut through empty land. No houses. No exits close enough to explain a full stop. When we finally saw the reason, it made less sense than the waiting. A semi lay jackknifed across both lanes. The tractor angled hard, trailer skewed, blocking everything. Headlights on, cab lights on. Both trailer doors stood open, swinging a little with the wake of passing air from nowhere. There was no driver. No shape in the cab. No body on the pavement. No spilled freight that explained the angle. It looked arranged, like someone had set it there and stepped away. The line crept forward a truck length at a time. I saw the asphalt near the cab. The surface looked chewed. Not cracked from impact, not melted from fire. It looked torn, as if something heavy had been dragged sideways while biting into the road. The marks ran against the direction of travel. Long arcs. Shallow gouges filled with black dust. We waited longer. A state trooper arrived without lights, then turned them on once he reached the scene. He walked the line with a set face. He waved us into a slow turn, sending trucks back the way we came. He called it a recovery situation. His hands shook when he motioned. I noticed because his glove brushed his belt twice before he steadied it. The word recovery stuck with me. It did not fit the quiet or the lack of wreckage. We turned around and rolled back into the dark. The road behind us felt narrower. The shoulder looked softer. My cousin kept the speed low, eyes fixed, posture tight. The marks in the asphalt stayed with me, the way they pointed the wrong way. On the return, he asked why the road near the cab looked torn, like something heavy had been pulled sideways. He asked it like a question he did not want answered. We finished the run. We slept. We kept moving because stopping costs money. The image faded enough to function. Weeks passed. He told me the rest after a long haul, daylight washing the cab clean. He had not told me before because it made him feel stupid, and because it had not felt like a thing that wanted words. While we were stopped at mile marker 83 before the trooper arrived, he saw movement under the trailer. Not a person, too low, too fast. Something ran beneath the belly of the jackknifed trailer, close to the ground, moving against traffic. He described the speed as purposeful, not panicked. He described the shape as long and dense, not upright. He did not describe eyes or teeth. He did not name it. He had watched it pass through the beam of headlights and vanish into the median scrub. That admission changed how I remembered the night. It forced the details into order. The lack of horns, the doors open, the torn asphalt, the troopers shaking hands, recovery situation. I started reading incident reports during downtime, freight manifests, accident reconstructions. I called a friend who worked heavy recovery. I learned how steel coils behave when restraints fail. I learned how feral hogs move along highway corridors at night, how they run low and fast, how they use medians as cover, how they spook easily but move with intent. I learned how a driver can stop for animals and lose control when a load shifts. I learned how open trailer doors can come from a driver checking straps at a turnout and never making it back to the cab. The explanation that fit did not require ghosts. It required bad luck layered on bad decisions. The truck ahead had been hauling steel coils on a flatbed converted with a curtain kit. A strap failed. One coil shifted, rolled, and bit into the asphalt when the driver braked hard for a sounder of hogs crossing the road. The coil dragged sideways as the tractor jackknifed, tearing the surface and throwing the balance off. The driver exited the cab to assess damage and reset straps, leaving doors open. Another hog clipped him from behind or spooked him into the path of the moving steel. Recovery did not mean towing. It meant retrieving remains without creating a spectacle on a dark road. That also explained the silence. Truckers know when to keep quiet. Horns draw attention. Attention brings delay. The troopers' shaking hands fit a scene that had turned human without warning. The movement under the trailer fit a hog running along the road edge, confused, injured, moving against traffic to reach cover. We stopped taking night routes after that. Not because of fear of the dark, but because the margin disappears at night. You cannot see load shifts until they happen. You cannot see animals until they are inside your braking distance. You cannot see the chain of small failures that add up to a dead stop at a mile marker with no signs. We will not drive past mile marker 83, even in daylight. It is not superstition. It is respect for a place where the road taught us how thin control is. The asphalt has been resurfaced. The gouges are gone. Traffic moves through without slowing now. I still picture the open doors, the quiet line of trucks, the marks pointing the wrong way. I still think about recovery as a word that hides the cost. We keep our runs shorter. We sleep more. We check straps twice. We give animals space. We remember that the road does not care how careful you plan to be. It only cares what happens when something runs low and fast through your headlights, and you react a half-second too late. I was hauling pulpwood out of a mill near Millinocket, seasonal work that paid better than steady runs farther south. Mud season had just started, that stretch between frozen ground and real spring where nothing is solid and everything wants to swallow you. The roads up there are not roads in the way people imagine. They are logging tracks cut into forest, rutted by heavy loads, patched by weather and neglect. Trees crowd in tight, spruce and fir leaning close enough to brush paint and mirrors. The ground never fully dries. Even on a clear day, it smells wet and sour, like rotting leaves and diesel soaked into soil. I was running solo that week, daylight hours only, because night driving those tracks was asking for trouble. That evening ran long. The loader crew was behind, and by the time I rolled out heavy, the sun was already sliding down behind the ridgeline. I did not want to stop with a full load. Stopping meant sinking. You kept moving or you paid for it later with chains, shovels, and a call for help that might not come until morning. There was no GPS in my cab then. I had paper maps folded and creased, pencil notes scribbled in the margins. Most of the turns were marked by habit, not signs. You learn them by repetition. I missed one. It was nothing dramatic, just a fork that looked familiar enough in low light. I chose wrong. The road narrowed fast. Ruts deepened. Brush dragged along the trailer sides with a steady rasp that set my teeth on edge. Branches snapped back against the cab. Both mirrors started tapping, then scraping. I slowed, but I did not stop. The shoulder was not a shoulder. It was mud disguised as ground. I could feel the weight of the pulpwood pushing me forward. Tires clawing for traction. The engine note changed as the truck worked harder, torque pulling me through places that wanted to bog me down. The forest closed in. No sky showed through anymore, just a dim green tunnel going gray as dusk thickened. The air smelled colder. My headlights threw pale beams that caught steam rising off the road. Every sound felt louder. The thump of tires over ruts. The creak of the trailer. The faint clatter of wood shifting against the stakes. I was looking for a place wide enough to turn around, when I saw something ahead that did not belong. At first it registered as a shadow in the road. Then it stepped into the light. It was tall, taller than any man I had hauled with, and thin in a way that did not make sense for the cold. It stood crooked, weight not balanced right, one shoulder higher than the other. The limbs looked wrong, not broken but bent at angles that made my stomach tighten. There was no high visibility vest, no hard hat, no reflective tape. Nothing caught the headlights except dull fabric and skin. The head was down, chin tucked, as if it was watching the ground instead of me. There was no time to think. My foot slammed the brake. The load surged. The cab dipped. The tires skidded in the mud. I cranked the wheel and felt the trailer swing wide behind me. The figure moved at the last second, not stepping away so much as folding sideways, like joints giving where they should not. I missed it. Or I thought I did. Something struck the trailer hard enough to shudder the whole rig. The impact came high above the wheels, too high for a deer and wrong for any animal I knew from those woods. The sound was a wet slap mixed with a hollow thud, like hitting packed mud with a shovel. I did not stop. I straightened out and kept driving, heart pounding so hard it blurred my vision. The mirrors showed only darkness and brush whipping past. I drove until the road widened enough to feel safe, which took longer than it should have. When I finally stopped, the engine idling rough in the cold air, my hands were shaking. The silence pressed in heavy once the cab door closed behind me. I walked back along the trailer with a flashlight. The beam caught streaks of mud smeared along the aluminum. Then I saw the prints. They were handprints, pressed flat and dragged, fingers splayed. The mud outlined them clearly. The fingers were long, longer than mine, and the joints bent too many times before reaching the tips. Each finger showed extra creases where knuckles should not be. The palms were narrow. There were more marks than made sense for one hand, overlapping in a way that suggested gripping, then sliding as the truck moved away. There was no blood, no hair. Just mud and the faint impression of skin texture where it had pressed hard. The prints were high enough that whatever made them had reached up, or already stood tall enough to meet the trailer side. I did not stay to study them. I wiped my hands on my jeans, climbed back into the cab, and eased forward until I found a wider junction. I recognized that one. From there, I took the long way out, adding miles rather than risk another wrong turn. The rest of the drive passed without incident, but the feeling did not fade. Every dark gap between trees felt watched. Every bump made me flinch. I rolled into the yard later than planned, mud-caked and exhausted, and dropped the load without lingering. Over the next few days, I kept seeing those hands when I closed my eyes. I replayed the moment over and over, looking for a clean explanation. The woods up there hold people who do not want to be found. Seasonal camps, drifters, folks living rough, bent by injury, cold, and long habits. Someone could have been walking the road. Someone tall, wearing layers that hid shape, joints stiff or damaged. The extra bends could have been gloves folded strange, fingers pressed and dragged by momentum. Panic distorts memory. Headlights flatten depth and make bodies look wrong. That line of thinking almost worked until I thought about where it happened. That spur was not active. No fresh cuts. No reason for anyone to be out there on foot at dusk, far from camps and miles from the nearest maintained road. And the height of the impact stayed with me. Whatever hit the trailer did not jump or stumble into it. It met it. Later that week, while waiting on a loader repair, I overheard the foreman talking about routes. He mentioned certain spurs that were never put on official maps, roads cut and abandoned decades back. They were unstable, dangerous, and known for accidents. Equipment lost, people hurt. He treated it like common knowledge, the kind passed down without detail. Avoid those roads. There was no benefit in running them. I checked my map that night. The turn I took was marked faint, a pencil line added by someone long ago. It led nowhere useful. I finished out the week. I did my job. But I asked for different runs after that, farther south closer to paved roads. I still drive. I still haul. I respect bad weather and worse roads. I do not take unmarked spurs anymore, no matter how familiar they seem. Some places hold too many mistakes layered over time, pressed into the ground like those prints, waiting for weight to pass close enough to leave another mark. I agreed to go on overnights with my brother because he kept insisting it was different from day runs. He said the roads were quieter, fewer people to deal with, and that the night had a rhythm that made hauling easier. He liked the hum of the tires on asphalt and the vibration under the cab. Said it felt like the truck became part of you if you let it. I was hesitant at first. The idea of long hours alone with someone else's route, alone with just the truck in the dark, made me uneasy. But he was persuasive, and he had that calm certainty that always made me follow along. So we hooked up a refrigerated trailer loaded with meat from a regional packing plant and headed out just after midnight. The first hour was typical and quiet. The road was flat for stretches, lined by pines and low scrub, nothing out of the ordinary. The reefer unit hummed steadily, a low mechanical tone that seemed to occupy the same space as the tires, a constant companion that reminded us the cargo had its own needs, and we had to keep moving. I watched the lines of white and yellow reflect off the hood in the headlights. My brother kept one hand on the wheel, the other tapping the dash lightly, almost like he was feeling the pulse of the rig. He moved through the gears smoothly, anticipating curves before they appeared. the truck responding as if it were listening. Around 3 in the morning, the CB crackled. It was faint at first, almost a hiss underneath the static, but it grew. Then I heard it clearly, a voice calling my brother's real name. Not his handle, not the usual trucker pseudonym, just his name, crisp and deliberate. My brother laughed it off, shaking his head. He said drivers mess with each other, that some people get bored and use CBs to freak people out. But the tone of the voice was wrong. It didn't carry the casual laughter or randomness of a prank. It was close, deliberate, cutting through the steady buzz of the reefer, almost timed with the way the truck moved over the road. I mentioned it quietly, trying not to make him defensive. He just shrugged and kept driving, muttering something about people not having anything better to do. I nodded, trying to focus on the road, telling myself it was nothing. But then it happened again, always under bridges. Every time we went under a bridge, the static spiked and the voice came, distorted, like it was underwater, slowed down, stretched, just long enough to make me check the mirrors reflexively, as if someone could be there. Nothing ever was. The highway was empty except for us. There were no other trucks, no cars, just the faint glow of streetlights bouncing off asphalt, the occasional reflection of water in the low rivers we passed. My brother didn't seem worried, but I could see tension in his jaw. His eyes were fixed on the road, hands tight on the wheel. We stopped at a rest area near a river, just past a long stretch of winding road. I got out to check the reefer unit, the cold air hitting me hard after the heat of the cab. The night was still, nothing moving but the water below, and the occasional bird startled by my headlights. The reefer hummed steadily, the valves clicking softly. I checked the gauges, everything normal. I leaned against the trailer for a moment, listening to the quiet, letting the vibrations of the running unit sink into my chest, trying to calm down after the noise on the CB. When I got back, my brother was sitting perfectly still, staring straight ahead at the cab door. His face was pale, almost gray in the dim light. I asked him if he was okay. He didn't answer at first, just pointed toward the door. He said someone had knocked on it while I was gone. I went around the cab looking. Nothing. No one. No footprints in the gravel, no marks on the metal. The night was silent again, except for the hum of the reefer and the faint rush of the river. I tried to joke about it, trying to shake off the feeling, but my brother didn't smile. He didn't move. He just sat there, quiet, hands gripping the wheel loosely, eyes staring at the empty night. The way he held himself was different, tense but not angry, scared but not panicked. It was like he was carrying the memory of something he didn't want to confront. We drove again, slowly at first. The voice on the CB didn't come back immediately, but I could feel it in the spaces between the words, in the rhythm of the truck, the way the tires hit the asphalt. Every bridge made me flinch. Every empty stretch of highway made my chest tighten. I wanted to believe it was interference, some random signal bouncing off the bridges, some trucker with a bad sense of humor. But the sound of it calling his name, clear, deliberate, always there, made it impossible to ignore. We passed through a long rural stretch with nothing on either side but trees and the occasional utility pole. The reefer hummed steadily. My brother stopped talking altogether. We didn't need to. The road had a language of its own. The vibration under the cab was steady, and I listened to it as if it could tell me what was happening. I kept checking the mirrors, the horizon, the edge of the road, expecting to see a figure standing in the trees, or some car that had pulled out of nowhere. There was nothing, just the road, the bridge shadows, the low hum of the rig, and the occasional CB static that reminded me the night could hold more than the eye could see. Eventually, the voice stopped. It didn't fade, it didn't trail off. It just disappeared, leaving a kind of quiet that was heavier than the noise. My brother didn't say anything, didn't relax. We kept driving, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. His hands were tight on the wheel, knuckles white, jaw rigid. I thought about asking him to quit, to pull over, but something about him in that moment made me hesitate. It wasn't just fear. It was respect for the road, for the truck, for whatever memory had been triggered in him. I understood that much, even if I didn't understand the rest. We made it back to the depot the next morning. The sun was low and pale, the sky a thin wash of gray. Other drivers were rolling in, stretching, complaining about cold coffee and late nights. My brother didn't say much, just parked the rig and sat quietly. I could see it in him, the way his body relaxed just slightly when the truck was off. He stayed there for a long time, looking at the empty road outside the depot. I didn't ask him what it was. I didn't push. Some things aren't worth explaining, and some memories stick with you longer when they're not named. He quit trucking a month later. He didn't tell me why, not fully. Just that some voices don't belong to people, and some roads remember you. I've driven at night since, but never with him. Never that quiet stretch near the bridges. Never that same rig with the reefer humming beneath me. The memory of the knocks, the voice, the stillness of my brother sitting frozen at the cab door, stays with me, a weight in my chest whenever I hear static on the radio or the tires hum under the moonlight. It's not about ghosts or monsters. It's about something else. Something the night holds for those who move through it long enough. Something the road keeps for itself. And sometimes, it remembers you. The experience taught me to listen. Not just to the engine or the tires, but to the pauses in the night, the empty spaces where nothing should be. I learned that some stretches of road carry their own history. A memory of everyone who's passed through. My brother understood that more than I did, and maybe that's why he stopped. He didn't need to see anything to know it was there. He just needed to feel it, and once he did, he couldn't ignore it, couldn't keep driving past it without it becoming part of him. I've tried to go back, to rationalize it, but the bridges near the river stay in my mind. The way shadows cling to the concrete, the way the air vibrates in the cab, as if the night itself is pressing against the metal. No CB voice, no knocks, just the memory of it. I've run my own overnights since, but there's a caution in me now, a respect for the road's silence, and the moments where sound comes unbidden, where the static seems to carry a meaning just beyond comprehension. My brother was right, some roads remember you, and some voices don't belong to people. That's enough to make anyone reconsider what they're willing to hear in the dark. I don't know if I'll ever understand exactly what happened that night. I don't need to. The quiet, the hum, the long stretches under bridges, the precise timing of something that isn't there. Those are enough. They don't fade. They stay, tucked behind the rhythm of the engine, waiting for the next driver who thinks the night is empty. My brother left the trucks, left the roads, but he left me with the awareness that some parts of the world have their own memory, and it's patient, watching, and sometimes it reaches back. Even now, I remember the taste of the cold air by the river, the tension in my brother's hands, the way the night carried the voice right to us, unmistakable. I can feel the vibration in my chest just thinking about it. That's the thing about roads at night. They're alive in their own way, and you only see it when you're moving through it. When the hum of the rig is the only constant, and the voice comes through the static to remind you that you are not alone, not entirely. The lesson is simple: some roads should be respected, and some nights are best left unchallenged. I still drive, still haul, still take overnights when I need to, but I never forget that stretch near the river, the knock on the door, and the voice calling my brother's name. It isn't about monsters or ghosts. It's about knowing when to stop, knowing that even in the quiet, the world has its own awareness. And that is enough to make a man hang up his keys, as my brother did, and walk away. I can still see him walking back from the truck that morning, his posture stiff but resolved, leaving the rig behind. He didn't look back, not once, and I didn't follow him. Some things, I realized, are meant to be left alone. The road remembers, the voice lingers, And sometimes the only way to survive it is to step away and let it pass without trying to confront it. That was the only way he could. And in time, I understood why he chose it. I've driven hundreds of nights since thousands of miles, and the road has never forgotten. The hum of the reefer, the subtle vibrations, the way shadows cling under bridges, they're always there, just under the surface. And sometimes, just sometimes, in a stretch where the asphalt seems too quiet, I hear the faintest whisper, calling a name I know too well. Not a trucker handle, not a joke over the CB, just a name spoken clearly, deliberately, as if the road itself is reminding me that it remembers who passes through it. That is the memory I carry with me. And that is enough. The world of overnights isn't as empty as it seems. Every driver knows the hum, the vibration, the loneliness. But some nights, the loneliness has shape, and the road has a way of speaking without using words. You feel it in the ribs, in the pulse of the tires, in the static of the CB. You feel it in the silence between bridges. My brother felt it more than I did, and when he left the trucks behind, he walked away with more understanding than I could ever claim. I drive on, and I listen, knowing that the night keeps its own counsel, and sometimes it speaks to those who pay attention. That stretch near the river, the echoes under bridges, the unseen knocks. It isn't something I can explain, and it isn't something I want to. The lesson isn't hidden in mystery or supernatural. It's simple: the road remembers, and when it does, you notice. You can't unhear it, can't unfeel it, and if you ignore it, the quiet becomes heavier, insistent, almost tangible. My brother quit, and he was right. Some roads remember you. Some voices don't belong to people. And in the dark, that knowledge is enough to keep you moving carefully, always aware, never reckless. Even now, years later, I feel the memory when I cross that kind of bridge. The air vibrates differently. Tires hum differently. There's a pressure that wasn't there in daylight. I know the road is remembering, and I know it could call my name too if it chose. And I think of my brother, who walked away, who left the trucks and the long nights behind. He understood the night better than anyone I've met. He knew when to listen, when to respect, and when to step away. And that is a lesson I carry with me on every overnight run, in every quiet stretch of asphalt, under every bridge that hums with its own memory. Because some roads remember you, and you can't pretend they don't. I've never driven that stretch again with him, never together. I don't think we ever will. The memory is enough. The lesson is clear. The road keeps its record, and some voices will not be explained. My brother walks away from it, and I live with it. That's all that remains: attention, respect, and the quiet knowledge that the night has its own way of speaking, and it always remembers. I can still feel it, the weight of the silence, the faint hum in my chest, the memory of that knock. That night has never left me, and it never will. And I don't want it to. It is what it is: a road, a rig, a voice, and a memory that lingers long after the headlights have passed. The road remembers, and I will too. During the lockdowns, nothing stayed consistent long enough to trust. Hours of service exemptions came and went. State lines felt thicker than borders. Some way stations stayed open, some didn't, and the rules posted online were already outdated by the time you read them. I was hauling boxed dry goods east, running a route I had driven for years. The interstate shut down without warning because of a crash mixed with a health checkpoint. Traffic slowed, then stopped. After an hour of idling, drivers started peeling off wherever they could. That was when I saw the detour sign. It was an orange board zip tied to a chain, link fence near an overpass pillar. Black arrow. No department logo. No distance listed. No reflective stripes. It looked temporary, rushed, like someone had put it up because people needed somewhere to go. I watched 2 cars follow it. A straight truck followed after them. I waited, checked my mirrors, then took it. Sitting still felt worse than moving. The ramp dropped me onto a 2-lane county road cutting through farmland. Cornfields on both sides, dried and bent from late summer heat. The pavement was cracked but intact. It felt reasonable. The arrow had pointed straight, and the road stayed straight. I passed a grain elevator and a closed fuel station with plywood over the windows. I expected another sign telling me how to rejoin the interstate. None came. After 10 miles, the fields thinned out. Trees took over. Not thick forest, just long stretches of woods pressed close to the shoulder. The road narrowed. No shoulder to speak of. The yellow line faded, then returned, then vanished again. My GPS froze, then spun, then showed me drifting off the map. I reset it, same result. The radio dropped to static, then silence. I switched channels, nothing but a low hiss. I kept driving because stopping on a narrow road with no shoulder felt wrong. My mirrors showed empty space. No headlights behind me. No taillights ahead. I watched my fuel and my temperature gauges. Everything stayed normal. The engine hummed steady. The reefer unit vibrated through the floor, constant and reassuring. I came around a long bend and saw a farmhouse on the left. It sat back from the road behind a leaning fence. White paint peeled down to bare wood. The roof sagged. One window was broken and covered with plastic. The yard was overgrown, weeds higher than the hood of my truck. No lights. No movement. It looked abandoned in the way rural places often do when families leave and nobody takes over. I passed it and kept going. The road curved again, tighter this time, and climbed a shallow rise. Trees closed in, branches forming a loose canopy overhead. The light dimmed even though it was still afternoon. I drove another 15 minutes without seeing anything but woods and asphalt. Then the road bent left, then right, then straightened. The farmhouse appeared again on my left. Same fence. Same broken window. Same angle to the road. I checked my mirrors. I checked the direction of the sun. I knew I hadn't turned around. My logbook showed steady forward motion. I told myself rural roads loop. That was common. I drove on. The third time I passed it, my chest tightened. The yard looked the same, but the weeds near the fence were pressed down, as if something heavy had moved through them. The plastic over the window flapped. Though there was no wind, I could feel through the cab. I stared straight ahead and kept my speed steady. After that, the road dipped and the woods thickened. I lost any sense of direction. The sky faded toward evening faster than it should have. The temperature dropped. My headlights cut into a narrow tunnel of trees. I expected to see another house, a mailbox, a side road, anything. There was nothing. I passed the farmhouse a fourth time. This time, there were lights on inside. Not bright lights. Dim, yellow glow leaking through the intact windows. The broken window was dark. The plastic hung still. The yard remained overgrown, but the glow made the house feel occupied, awake. I smelled wood smoke through the vents. My hands tightened on the wheel. I did not slow down. I did not look back. The road seemed to stretch. My speed stayed the same, but the distance between bends felt longer. My clock showed time passing, but it did not match my sense of movement. The reefer unit kept running. Fuel dropped slowly. I stayed alert, watching for deer, watching for any sign of an intersection. My eyes burned from strain. At some point, the pavement changed. The tires sounded different, smoother. I realized I was back on a maintained road. The trees thinned. The sky lightened ahead. Dawn broke low and pale through the branches. I rounded one last bend and saw a familiar highway sign. A state route I recognized. I pulled onto the shoulder and sat there with the engine running. When I checked my log, 6 hours were unaccounted for. I knew how long I had been driving. I knew when I had left the interstate. The numbers did not line up. I wrote it off as stress, fatigue, the chaos of those months. I finished the run and went home. The feeling stayed with me. A week later, on my reset, I looked up the area. I traced the detour from the point where I had left the interstate. There was no official reroute listed for that day. The county road existed, but it dead-ended miles before where I remembered driving. Satellite images showed fields and woods, but no loop. No farmhouse near the road. I switched between map layers, same result. I called the state DO. After being passed around, someone confirmed there had been reports of unofficial detour signs during the lockdowns, locals trying to redirect traffic away from their towns, contractors moving signs without authorization, some signs stolen and placed elsewhere. They said drivers had ended up on private roads, farm lanes, even old access routes that no longer connected to anything useful. I asked about the farmhouse. I described the fence, the broken window, the yard. There was a pause. The person told me there had been a property like that years ago, before a road realignment. The house was demolished after the owner died. The access road was supposed to be blocked off. According to their records, it no longer existed. That explanation fit on paper. Old roads sometimes linger. Pavement remains under leaves. Temporary signs can lead people where they should not go. Fatigue can distort time. Driving alone through unfamiliar terrain can play tricks on the mind. I accepted that. What I could not explain was the consistency. Passing the same place 4 times without turning. The lights where no building should be. The missing hours that did not match my fuel use or mileage. My truck data showed steady speed, no stops, no sharp turns. Just forward motion. I filed the paperwork I needed to stay compliant. I updated my routes. I started carrying printed detour lists when possible. I stopped trusting anything that did not have official markings. If a sign looked improvised, I stayed put and waited. Months later, I drove that interstate again. The exit where I had left was closed off properly now, barricades and flashing arrows forcing traffic to slow. Beyond the fence, I saw the stretch of road where the orange board had been zip-tied. The fence was intact. No sign, no access. I did not look for the farmhouse. I did not want to test whether it was still there. I know what I experienced can be explained in parts. Stress, isolation, long hours, confusing conditions. I also know that every mile I drive now has weight to it. Roads are not neutral. They carry history, mistakes and shortcuts that should have stayed forgotten. I do not take detours anymore unless they are official. I would rather sit in traffic than follow something that looks improvised. I trust pavement I recognize. I trust signs that belong where they are. Some places exist only because you are moving through them, and once you leave, they have no reason to stay. Cold does things to sound that drivers learn to respect. Diesel loses its low rumble and turns sharp. Rubber stiffens. Metal contracts and complains. I was hauling fuel north in January. A long run past the last reliable services, past the point where plows turn back, and the road becomes a narrow ribbon between black spruce and drifts shaped like waves. The load was light enough to pull clean but heavy enough to punish mistakes. I had checked the weather twice, then again at the yard. Clear skies, deep cold, wind from the west. The kind of cold that turns breath into a cloud inside the cab when you crack a window. The truck was a Cascadia I knew well. I trusted its sounds. I trusted the way the steering wheel talked through my hands. I trusted the mirrors. The tank was insulated, lines heat, traced, valves tight. I carried extra fuel filters and a spare belt. North runs demand preparation. They also demand patience, because nothing moves fast when it is 30 below. By the time I crossed the last marked milepost, the sky had gone brittle. Stars looked close enough to scrape. The road surface was hard, packed snow polished to a shine by stubs and chains. I kept it steady, not pushing, not braking unless I had to. Radio was quiet. Phone had bars, then did not. That did not worry me. It never does up there. The first thing I noticed was the sound. Not a bang or a scrape, a rhythm. It cut through the engine note and the tire hiss. Even with the heater roaring, it reached me. Thud, 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 fast and even, on the passenger side. I checked the mirror. Snow haze. Tree lines sliding by. Nothing else on the road. The rhythm stayed. It matched my speed in a way that did not make sense. I eased off the throttle just a touch. The rhythm stayed. I added a little. It stayed. I told myself it was ice shedding from the trailer ladder, or a strap flapping, or a loose fairing. Cold makes plastic act alive. Cold makes everything louder. Still, the sound was too regular. It had weight. It had timing. The cab rocked once, barely, like a hand on the steps testing them. I felt it through the seat, through the wheel. I did not see anything in the mirror. I did not turn my head. Turning your head on ice is how you drift. I kept my eyes forward and my hands light. The road narrowed through a cut. The spruce leaned in. The rhythm ran with me through the cut. I had hauled fuel for years. I knew how animals behave. Moose step slow and heavy. Deer dart. Wolves pace but do not press steel. Caribou travel in groups and cross when they choose. This did not fit clean. The rhythm stayed tight to the cab. Too close, too controlled. I told myself it was ice breaking free from the tank shell and slapping the catwalk. I told myself it was wind pressure changing along the fairing. I told myself anything that kept my pulse even. For nearly a minute it stayed there. The engine screamed sharper as the air grew denser. Metal snapped and popped as the temperature dropped another notch. The rhythm matched the tires. When I touched the brake, it touched with me. The cab rocked again, lighter this time, as if weight shifted on the passenger steps. I focused on the road. I did not swerve. I did not slow to a crawl. Panic makes ice slicker. I drove the truck. Then the rhythm faded. It did not run ahead. It did not fall back. It stopped as if it had never been there. The silence felt loud. I rolled another 20 miles before I reached a station that stayed open through winter. Because the mines needed fuel and drivers needed light. The canopy glowed like a ship at sea. I pulled in, set the brake, and let the engine idle. When I stepped down, the cold bit my face. Snow squeaked under my boots. I walked the passenger side with my flashlight. The beam caught frost patterns thick as lace across the door and sleeper wall. At first it looked like wind-driven ice, normal for that stretch. Then the shape resolved. There were marks in the frost where heat had touched metal. Not smears, not scratches. Clear shapes 5 to a side, spread and curved, placed as if someone had pressed palms flat against the door and leaned. The frost around them was heavier, feathery, like breath had fed it. Lower down, near the steps, there were scuffed patches where ice had broken away, fresh and sharp-edged. I stood there longer than I should have. The cold crept through my jacket. I looked for hair, blood, fabric. Anything that would turn the shapes into an animal story. There was nothing. The steps were clear of tracks because the wind had scarred them. The ground held only my own prints and the trucks. Inside, under the lights, the station attendant noticed the door and indicated it with a look that carried concern. I nodded, paid, and left without explaining because there was nothing to explain that sounded solid even to me. I drove south before dawn. In daylight, the marks were gone. Frost releases its grip when the sun rises, even when the air stays cold. Back at the yard, I went over the truck inch by inch. I found ice build up along the ladder and the catwalk, thick enough to break loose in chunks. I found a loose wind deflector bolt that let the panel flex. I found a strap tail frozen into a shape that could slap with a rhythm when the wind hit it right. Each thing fit part of the night. None fit all of it. Over the winter, I read reports and learned more than I wanted about how wind pressure can create patterns that look intentional. How warm air leaks from a sleeper vent can melt frost in shapes that resemble hands. How ice shedding can feel like weight. I learned how sound travels farther in cold and how the cab amplifies it. I learned that fear fills gaps faster than facts. I also learned that some stretches north of the turnback have feral dogs that run vehicles for warmth, pressing close to exhaust and steps, keeping pace until they tire. I learned that a dog's paws can leave impressions that look wrong when frost grows around them, that heat from an engine can sharpen those impressions into something human at a glance. I learned that dogs will jump, test, and shift their weight when they smell fuel and warmth. Those explanations sit on the page clean and tidy. They explain the rhythm. They explain the rocking. They explain the marks if you want them to. They explain why I never saw anything in the mirror. They explain why there were no tracks under the steps. They do not explain how close it felt. They do not explain how the timing matched my breathing when I noticed it. They do not explain the certainty I felt when the rhythm stopped, the sense that whatever had been there chose to leave rather than failed to keep up. I finished the season. I ran south loads. I avoided that route when I could. When I could not, I drove it in daylight. I watched the mirrors more than necessary. I checked the steps at every stop. In spring, when the roads softened and the ice let go, I sold the truck. I told myself it was business. New equipment, better mileage, less wear. That was true. The truth that stayed with me was simpler. I trusted that truck until the night it taught me how thin the line is between noise and meaning in deep cold. I did not want to sit in that seat again and wonder which sounds deserved my attention. I was running nights because nights paid better, and because traffic thinned enough to keep a steady pace. That run cut through a stretch of state highway most drivers avoided after dark. No lights, long curves, trees close enough to scrape mirrors if you drifted. I had hauled through there for years, enough to know every dip and frost have by feel. I trusted routine more than instinct, which is how most mistakes start. The CB stayed on low volume, channel scanning slow, just enough to catch weather or a stalled rig. Most of the time it was dead air and distant carriers stepping on each other. Around 2 in the morning, just past a grain elevator and a closed way station, a clear voice came through the noise. Not loud, not rushed. It sounded young, steady, like someone trying not to sound scared. The voice said a car had broken down near a curve with no shoulder and asked for help. I did not hear panic. I did not hear breathless fear. I heard control. That made it feel real. People who fake trouble usually lean into it. This voice stayed flat, almost careful. I slowed without thinking and checked mirrors. Empty road, no hazards ahead. I told myself I could call it in at the next town, but the voice kept talking. It described the curve, the way the trees leaned inward, the smell of wet leaves after rain. That detail stuck. It matched the night. I answered once, short, professional, saying I was a mile out. I did not give my name. The reply came back smooth, like the speaker had been waiting. Directions followed. Simple, exact, using landmarks I knew. A culvert with a broken reflector. A sign bent inward. A stand of pines that swallowed sound. Each thing appeared when described, not before, not after. The timing felt off by seconds, like someone reading the road from inside my cab. I told myself it was coincidence. That road had limited features and my mind filled gaps. Still, I slowed more than needed. My hands stayed tight on the wheel. The voice never asked questions. It never reacted to my speed or position. It kept talking at the same pace, marking distance in curves and shadows. It never said my handle again. It did not need to. The road narrowed where the county stopped caring. Pavement thinned. The shoulder vanished. Branches closed in. I should have turned back there. I had hauled fuel and livestock through worse, but this felt wrong in a quiet way. The voice described a fallen mailbox ahead. I saw it seconds later, wood splintered, numbers peeled. The voice mentioned a pull-off that did not show on maps. I knew of it, a dirt notch used by hunters. I had never stopped there. My rig felt too big for the lane. The trailer tires hissed on damp leaves. The engine note changed as the grade shifted. I told myself I would stop short, keep the doors locked, call state police. I did not say that over the radio. I did not say anything. The voice did not pause. It did not fill silence. It kept a steady flow like a recording with a purpose. Then it said I was almost there. That line hit harder than it should have. Not because of the words, but because of the certainty. The voice did not check distance. It did not ask if I could see headlights. It did not adjust. It stated a fact. My chest tightened. I glanced at the fuel gauge, the mirrors, the shoulder that did not exist. The trees felt closer. The darkness pressed in like weight. I cut the radio mid-sentence and slowed to a crawl. The road ahead bent left into thicker timber. No lights, no reflectors, No sign of a car. I pulled the wheel right and eased onto a narrow farm track I knew led back to the main road. The trailer brushed branches. I did not stop. I did not back up. I did not look for anything in the ditch. I kept moving until the pavement widened and the trees fell back. I drove until the sky lightened. I parked at a truck stop that smelled like old grease and coffee and sat there until my hands steadied. I told myself I had imagined the timing. I told myself it was a bored operator or a prank. I told myself nothing bad had happened because nothing bad had happened. I logged the hours and slept. Over the next weeks, I avoided that road. Dispatch asked why my time slipped. I blamed construction. I did not mention the voice. I did not mention how calm it sounded. I kept the CB on scan but lower. Most nights were normal. Then one morning, just before dawn, I caught a fragment while flipping channels. A clear voice, mid-thought, describing a bend in a road I was not on. The tone matched. The pacing matched. The words stopped when the scan moved on. That started happening more often. Not every night. Not predictable. Always fragments. Never a greeting. Never a question. Always directions. Always landmarks. Sometimes places I knew. Sometimes places I did not. The voice never aged. It never changed speed. It never carried emotion. It sounded like someone reading notes. I finally talked to a retired driver who knew radios better than roads. He explained how repeaters could loop, how recordings could be set to trigger on signal strength, how people could rig a mobile setup to blanket a stretch of highway. He talked about theft crews that pulled trucks into narrow roads, about scouts and spotters, about voices chosen to sound harmless. He talked about how calm sells safety. He talked about how some setups break and keep playing until power dies. The explanation fit enough to let me sleep. Someone had set a lure. Someone had mapped that road. Someone had recorded directions timed to landmarks. When I cut the radio, I broke the loop. When I hear fragments now, it is bleed from a repeater still hanging on, or a recording caught by scan, or another driver answering somewhere else, triggering the same script. I do not run that road anymore. I keep the CB muted unless needed. When a calm voice asks for help, I call it in and keep moving. The fragments still show up sometimes out of context mid-sentence, like a map read to nobody. I know what it is. I know why it happens. Knowing does not make it feel smaller. It only makes it clear how close I came to following a voice that did not need me to answer, only to listen. We had done this kind of run before, and never thought twice about it. 3 trucks moving overnight, spaced out just enough to keep each other in sight without riding bumpers. A mile apart on a straight stretch gives you room to react and still feel like you are not alone out there. Clear skies. No moon, but enough starlight to see the horizon break clean over the road. Dry pavement. Cold air. Good conditions by any standard that matters when you haul heavy and long. I was the second truck. I liked that position. I could watch the lead lights rise and fall with the road, and still keep my own pace without pressure. The third truck was far enough back that his headlights never reached me, but close enough that I knew he was there. By the faint radio hiss and the shared rhythm of speed, we had all driven these highways for years. No rookies. No thrill seekers. Just work, schedules, and the quiet focus that comes when the world narrows to lanes, mirrors, and the steady pull of the engine. The area was rural, wide fields broken by tree lines and drainage ditches. No towns for miles. No crossings. No animals showing that night. The kind of road where your mind settles into a low gear and every small change stands out. That is why what happened cut through so hard. The lead truck swerved. Not a drift. Not a correction. A hard, committed move that pushed his trailer close to the shoulder. I saw his brake lights flare, and the back end wiggle before he brought it straight again. It happened fast but not fast enough to miss. A maneuver like that means something sudden and solid in the lane. Wind does not do that. Neither does fatigue when the road is straight and the air is calm. By the time I reached the spot where it happened, my body was already tight. hands firm on the wheel, eyes scanning the pavement, the shoulders, the ditch. There was nothing there. No debris, no animal, no mark on the asphalt. The road looked untouched, clean as it had a mile before. I rolled through expecting something to jump back into view, but the lane stayed empty. No movement in the periphery, no shadow crossing the beams. I eased off the throttle without braking and let the truck settle. The mirrors showed nothing out of place. I felt foolish for being on edge until the radio crackled with raw noise and urgency from behind me. The third truck hit something. I did not see it. I heard it through the sound carried by open night air and metal. A dull impact, heavy and wrong, not the sharp crack of a tire blowout or the thump of a pothole. The sound traveled forward through the stillness and reached me a second later, followed by the brief wobble of his headlights as he fought the wheel. I checked my mirrors again, heart racing now, and watched him slow. No sparks. No smoke. He stayed upright. The lane stayed clear. Whatever he hit did not stay on the road. We all pulled off at the next wide shoulder where farm equipment sometimes rests during harvest. Engines idled. Headlights washed over gravel and weeds. The silence after the noise felt thick. The third truck's front bumper showed a dent pushed inward, low and centered, with scuffed paint and no trace of blood or hair. No plastic shards. No broken light. The metal looked pressed by weight, not cut or torn. We walked the shoulder with flashlights and found nothing. No debris. No tracks. The grass lay flat in places, as if something had passed through and not stayed. The ditch held water but no ripple, no sign of recent disturbance. The road surface showed no scrape or mark, where something heavy would have struck and fallen. Later, after we were done and moving again, we tried to piece it together in our own heads. We described what we thought we saw or felt, each of us certain in our own memory. That was when it became worse instead of better. The lead truck remembered a tall shape moving fast, crossing the lane in 2 strides. He thought of a person at first, then rejected it because of the speed and the way it moved. He remembered shoulders, a mass higher than the hood line, gone before his mind could settle on details. I remembered something lower, wide, solid, a dark block that seemed to absorb the headlights instead of reflecting them. Not tall enough to be a person, too compact to be an animal I knew. It felt like the road itself had risen for a moment. The third driver remembered weight and impact more than shape. He said it felt like hitting a heavy cart or a rolled pallet that should not have been there. No bounce, no slide, just resistance and then nothing, as if it had stepped off the lane after contact. 3 experienced drivers, 3 different impressions. Same place, same minute. Same fear in the chest that comes when something breaks pattern without warning. We finished the run without incident, but the rhythm was gone. Each mile stretched longer than the last. Every shadow along the ditch demanded attention. Every patch of darker asphalt raised tension. The sky stayed clear. The road stayed empty. That somehow made it worse. When daylight came, the answer followed with it, slow and unwelcome. The stretch of road ran alongside a decommissioned industrial site set back behind trees. Old grain handling equipment, storage yards, and temporary fencing left from a project that had shut down months earlier. In daylight, it was obvious how little oversight remained. Broken sections of fence. Gates chained but loose. Heavy materials stacked and left where they last stood. Near the road, down a shallow access track, lay a collapsed wheeled ballast used to stabilize portable lighting towers. Thick steel frame, solid base, painted dark. One of its supports was bent, fresh scrape shining through the rust. The weight of it explained the dent in the bumper. The height of it explained why the lead truck saw something tall. The way it could roll or tip explained how it crossed the road fast without leaving a mark, and then left the lane before I reached the spot. The wind had been light but steady all night, enough to move unsecured equipment once it started. Gravity did the rest. The ballast had likely tipped from its resting place, rolled down the slight grade, crossed the road under its own momentum, and continued into the ditch after impact. No blood because it was never alive. No debris because it was whole. No tracks because steel on asphalt leaves little when it rolls clean. What stayed with me was not relief. It was the understanding of how close routine comes to chaos without warning. How 3 trained minds filled the gap with different shapes, because none of us had context in the dark. How confidence in experience does not protect you from surprise, only from panic after we reported it. The site got secured later that week. The road returned to being just a road, but something in me shifted. We never ran convoy again. Not because we blamed each other or doubted skill, but because that night taught me how easily shared certainty fractures under limited information. A mile of space had not kept us safe from the same risk. It had only spaced out the moment of impact. Alone, I trust my senses and accept their limits. Together, the differences became louder than the comfort. I still drive nights. I still prefer clear skies and empty lanes. I watch the shoulders closer now, not for animals or people, but for things that should not move and sometimes do. Heavy objects left to chance. Mistakes waiting for wind and slope. The kind of danger that does not announce itself and leaves no sign once it passes. That night did not end with a mystery. It ended with an explanation grounded in metal, neglect, and timing. That is what makes it hard to forget. It proved that fear does not require imagination, when reality already holds enough weight to dent steel and memory alike. I stopped because the truck ahead of me was stopped. Simple as that. 2 lanes empty highway, straight stretch cutting through scrub and low hills. No reason to swerve. No reason to pass. The hazard lights were on, blinking slow and steady, reflecting off my windshield. I eased down, air brakes sighing, tires humming down to nothing. Midnight had already passed. The sky was clear. No moon worth mentioning, just stars and a hard black road. I sat there for a few seconds with my hands on the wheel, waiting for movement. None came. No door opening. No shadow crossing the cab. No signal. The engine in front of me was running. I could see the faint heat shimmer in the air behind the exhaust. That stood out right away. Drivers do not leave a truck running without a reason. Fuel costs money. Every mile matters. I watched the mirrors. Nothing behind me. Nothing on the shoulders. No animals. No stalled cars. I set my own hazards and rolled to a stop far enough back to leave space. I stayed in the seat longer than I should have. The quiet pressed in. No wind. No insects. Even the usual highway noise felt muted, like the sound had been swallowed by the land. I told myself the driver might be using the bathroom or checking a strap. Maybe a blown tire. Maybe someone new to nights who panicked and froze. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped down from the cab. The air felt cold against my face. Dry. Smelled like dust and oil. The sound of my boots on asphalt seemed too loud. I walked forward along the center line, beam aimed low. The hazard lights kept blinking. Orange on, orange off. Each flash felt like a heartbeat. When I reached the back of the trailer, I slowed. The doors were sealed. No damage. No loose straps. The tires looked fine. I moved along the driver's side, light tracing the metal, catching scratches and old grime. The engine noise grew louder as I neared the cab. A steady idle, smooth, recently stopped. The driver door was closed. The window was down halfway. I expected to see a shape inside, a shoulder, a cap on the dash. Anything. I stepped closer and angled the light in. The seat was empty. The steering wheel untouched. No phone, no drink, no jacket tossed aside. The sleeper curtain was open. The bunk was bare, no bag, no boots. The floor was clean except for dust. The smell inside was fresh, warm, like someone had just been there and stepped out seconds ago. I felt my stomach tighten. I leaned back and checked around the truck. Under the frame, between the cab and trailer. Nothing. The ground showed no fresh footprints. Just old tire marks and gravel pressed flat. I listened. The engine idled. My own truck ticked behind me as it cooled. Beyond that, nothing. That was when I heard breathing. It came from behind me. Close. Low, slow. Not loud, but clear enough that I knew it was not my own. It had weight to it. a pull in and out. I felt it on the back of my neck before my mind caught up. Every muscle locked. My flashlight hand shook. I did not turn around. I did not speak. I did not think about what it could be. I moved. I ran. I dropped the light without realizing it. I ran past the trailer, past the open road, straight back to my truck. My boots slipped on gravel. I hit the steps hard, climbed blind, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands fumbled with the keys, even though the engine was already running. I threw it into gear and rolled forward. Hazards still on, heart pounding so hard it hurt. I did not look in the mirrors. I did not look at the stopped truck as I passed it. I focused on the road ahead and kept the speed steady until my breathing slowed enough to see straight. My legs shook against the pedals. My arms burned from tension. I drove for miles like that, afraid to stop, afraid to slow, afraid that if I did, I would hear it again. The road stayed empty. No headlights. No taillights. Just me and the hum of the tires and the wind around the cab. When the shaking finally eased, I pulled into the next way station. The lights were on. The lot was empty except for one parked patrol unit. I shut down and sat there for a long time before I moved. I reported what happened. I described the truck, the location, the time. I explained the hazards, the warm engine, the empty cab. I explained the sound behind me. I did not exaggerate. I did not guess. I stuck to facts. They checked the logs. They checked the cameras. They checked the system for any trucks signed in on that stretch during that window. There was nothing. No record of a stop. No breakdown call. No logged vehicle matching what I described. No camera hits on the ramps before or after. According to the system, the road had been empty all night except for me. I stayed parked until morning. I did not sleep. When daylight came, the world looked normal again. Flat land scrub. Power lines. Trucks passing like always. I drove back through the area later that week, during the day, with traffic around me. I found the spot by mile marker and road shape. There was no pullout. No shoulder wide enough for a full stop. No place a truck should have been sitting without blocking the lane. I thought about the breathing. I thought about how close it sounded. I thought about cargo theft reports I had heard over the years. Teams working remote roads. One truck used as bait. Another parked dark. Someone waiting for a driver to step out. I thought about how clean that cab was. How there were no personal items at all. Like it was never meant to be driven far. Just meant to stop someone. The explanation settled into place slowly. A decoy truck logged under false plates or no plates at all. Dropped in a blind stretch. Engine kept running to sell the problem. Someone hiding low behind the trailer or in the shadow of the cab, close enough to breathe on my neck. Waiting for me to turn around. Waiting for me to be distracted. I had done exactly what they counted on. I got out. I walked up alone. I stood with my back exposed. The only thing that saved me was that sound. A mistake on their part. Or impatience. Or maybe I was closer than they planned. I still stop for other drivers when it makes sense. I still help when I can. But I do not get out at night on empty roads anymore. I call it in. I keep my doors locked. I trust my instincts when something feels off. That stretch of highway still looks ordinary, but every time I pass it, I remember how normal it felt right up until it didn't, and how close I came to not driving away at all.